Well
Welcome
done.
back to the 2023 edition of Master Coaches Wednesday Weekly Buzz. I'm Bob Bertucci, joined by fellow Master Coaches Kathy George, Bill Walton, and of course the infamous Mick Haley.
Oh, good. We're going to start already.
And the infamous.
Well, I don't want to say famous. If I said famous, it might go to his head.
Yeah, I get big head. Then I fill the whole screen.
Absolutely.
Kathy,
Well,
I'm gonna turn this over to you for you to introduce our first guest.
Well, I'm really excited to introduce Keegan here because he's been a great friend over the years, and we're really excited to have you on. And you've made a huge change here. But let me talk a little bit about you. You're now currently the head coach at Minnesota. You are the president of the AVCA. Are you still doing that this next year?
Yeah, looking forward to my retirement there from that position. No, it's been a wonderful role, very, very fulfilling. So yes, still in that role.
It gets your thumb on everything. You know exactly what's going on out there in the world. And then there's FIVB Volleyball Info Supervisor. Tell me what that is exactly.
Yeah, that's throwing an 18-year-old in an FIVB event and saying, hey, here you go. You're the VIS supervisor, figure it out.
And you get to supervise it.
It's a formative experience, but it was my first experience with USA Volleyball. Very, very.
That's awesome. And you've gone on and you've been the USA U18 and the U19 coach. You've also coached junior volleyball, and of course you came from the University of Washington. So you've been kind of through a lot of different things. And one of the stories I heard, Bill kind of filled us in on this, was that you grew up, finding out about volleyball actually through your sister playing. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, little brother dragged around to some tournaments. I think is a story that some people can relate to. And you get so tired of spending all your weekends that you just grab a ball and hit it against a wall, and then you hit it over a net. And before you know it, you think you can be the next, I don't know, Steve Timmons, which you're not, as you figure out pretty quickly. But that's where I met the game, and my sister would be my first boss in the game for 10 years when I was coaching clubs. So it's certainly an important person in bringing the game to my life.
That was a good SC analogy. Thank you.
Yeah, and I certainly know about being dragged around by my brothers. So you kind of just pick up what you're doing. So I can appreciate that. But anyway, you're making a big step. I mean, this is across not all the way across the country, but you're going from the Pac-12 and a really strong Washington team, and you get this offer to join Minnesota. Can you tell me a little bit about that thought process and maybe some of the differences you're noticing between like the Pac-12, the Big Ten, even though it's kind of early for you yet?
Yeah, it certainly wasn't something I was looking to do, and maybe I think you can relate to that it's the job that you weren't looking for that seems to find you. And that's what happened here. And the position opened up and something called out to me, and it made me investigate what that feeling was and why I was feeling that way. And the more I investigated, the more I thought, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is the next step for me. And there was certainly some grieving and some sadness to knowing that something was coming to an end, but then pretty quickly a feeling of, okay, this was the right decision. And I think as we coach long enough or get a little older in life, we know when things are coming to an end and when we should be moving on. And that's what happened. But what do I notice differently? I've been stopped in the grocery store a few more times than I would have been in Seattle. So that the fan base here is passionate about sports just like Seattle, but they're passionate about volleyball in a way that I maybe have never seen before. And so I'm looking forward to a really committed and educated fan base giving me the business in all sorts of spaces. So there you go.
Right. Well, being a Big Ten girl, Minnesota has always had such a high caliber booster group and just a lot of following in the whole conference. But certainly Minnesota has been up at the top, and you follow some really strong coaches. Mike Hebert was phenomenal. We go all the way back, Steph Schluter and people like that. So it's always been well regarded. And so, you're really following a bunch of great people, but you are too. So you're a great coach, and we're excited to have you there. So looking for that to continue on. So
thank you for that welcome from someone who knows how to do the job that I'm trying to do. So thanks for that.
I know what you're in for. So, but anyway, Mick, I think Mick, you're next. Do you have a question for?
Oh yeah, I have a couple of questions. Always, that I always got some questions.
Absolutely.
but Keegan, I have to tell you, my first NCAA national championship was in Williams Arena on that elevated floor. Is that still elevated over there?
It is elevated, yeah, just
It's
across
right
the
next to
hall.
where you play, right?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Yeah, so we would sit with our nose on the floor looking at the game, trying to see what was going on. So I have a lot of good stories, especially with the ice storm, trying to get into the place without a ticket for my 1-year-old, my 3-year-old. So almost missed the semifinals. And I thought you had the only dome stadium, and I found myself in a car jam going to St. Paul, just the opposite way I needed to go to the arena to get to the game. So long and the short of it, I thought I pulled this off for my players. They didn't know that I didn't almost make the match, and come to find out 30 years later, we have a get together, and they were all laughing. They said, we were all scared to death. You thought we left you, so that we never said anything. So pretty interesting. But you've got quite a challenge there. You've got to attack now a whole different recruiting area. You've got a lot of different things, and the world's changed since I was out there with you. You've got the portal. You've got people legally or illegally cherry picking players from teams and vice versa. So you've got all these options now, different than what Kathy and Bill and Bob and I had to put up with when we were out there. How are you going to build your roster?
Yeah, I think one thing I started with is just the players who were here was the first place I started. I often hear coaches when they make changes, I hear them walking around tournaments going, oh, when our players get here, then things are really going to get going, and I always kind of shook my head at that a little bit. I hadn't been through a transition like that, where you're meeting a bunch of players for the first time, but I kind of told myself, if I find myself in that situation, I'm starting with the kids that are there. They are your kids the moment you walk in that door, and they are your responsibility and your privilege. And so that's where I started. I ran away from a similar ice storm that came through, and I flew to, I think 4 states in 3 days. And I met with families in their living rooms, and I tried to give them a sense of who I was and build some trust with them, so that when the difficult times come, as they always do, that we had a foundation to go from. So that's really where I started. And then pretty quickly it went into, okay, who can we start adding to this roster? We hosted our first official visits, our first week on campus as a staff. And that was a trial by fire, which thankfully resulted in us acquiring a pretty special player. But yeah, it's not about taking every player. When you talk about building a roster, I just think you start with integrity and then potential for growth. Those are always my 2 values that I need. The player has to have integrity, and they have to have potential for growth. And then hopefully some other things align as well. But that's how I tackled the job when I got here.
It seems like men's basketball is something you look at in this regard. Calipari and a few of those guys built immediate rosters with transfer athletes. Then some other people developed from the base. In your conference alone, it looks like we have several different philosophies from what's happened with one university going to almost all freshmen, another university taking everybody's graduates and seniors and putting those in the lineup. How's that going to work? It just seems to me that Minnesota has been very proud of the junior players and the high school players that they've developed. And one of the things that happened in the course of the last group is there weren't very many Minnesota players on the team for a while. It seems like we've gotten back to that, but in this day of the portal, you can't always just recruit Minnesota and the surrounding states. So have you made a determination, or are you just doing this one recruit at a time and trying to figure it out?
I am, when it comes to recruiting, I do focus pretty tightly on an athlete that I like and take it to the end of its process before moving on to the next. I've never been cast a huge wide net, and then we'll take whoever we take. That hasn't been my philosophy, but this is a nationally competitive program, obviously, and has potential to recruit from all over the country. And I imagine it's going to be a combination, of local talent and then talent from all over the country. this place called me all the way from Seattle, and it's called players from all over the country for a while. That's what they've built here. And then the responsibility of that was attractive to me. The quality of coaches who have coached here, it motivated me. I thought, if I'm going to coach there, I'm going to have to get to my highest level in order to coach at this institution. And that was motivating for me. But yeah, I believe in having a diverse team of kids from all over the country who can teach each other and learn different perspectives. I think there's value in that. I think great teams are diverse in personality and backgrounds, and it's a pretty fulfilling experience. So we're going to need to acquire some transfers. We've already started that process. But one thing I don't want, Nick, is I don't want a shallow, short experience. I'm not interested in that. So whether we're together for 8 months or 6 years, whether I watch them grow up, I want it to be a meaningful experience. I'm not a ball machine. I tell them sometimes, that's not what I'm here for. I want it to be meaningful, whatever time we have together. So that's my approach.
So you're not just coaching your team. You're president of the AVCA. You've gotten yourself involved in a lot of other things. So you have to have perspective. What's your read on the future? Is the portal going to be very bad for Division I? In other words, is the majority of talent going to be locked into 15 or 20 programs? I mean, we have almost 450 Division I programs, and yet the top teams seem to be picking up players from the Sun Belt, the MAC, the different players, and then even in your own conference, we have players that have played for the championship that are transferring schools and staying in the conference. That seems to me not to be a positive thing, but what's your take on it?
Yeah, it's a polarizing topic, the portal. I try and occasionally give it credit for the good things it does. I think it's raised the standard of what a coach has to provide to a student athlete. I don't think coaches who don't provide a fulfilling experience will be able to hang on to their players. And so there's a part of me that I'm okay with that the standard of care is being raised across institutions, where if you're not following through on your commitment to athletes, then you're not going to have the opportunity to coach that athlete. So that's something that I'm okay with. I know San Diego is a little bit of a counter culture to that. I'm a former WCC guy. You saw what can happen when a couple very talented athletes join a strong mid-major program like that, what they're able to do. And so that's a pretty cool story, I think, and a sign of good things to come. There's going to be a little correction, there'll be less opportunities, I think, because once the COVID years are over, that there'll be less, not as many transfers, but it'll continue to exist for a while. And I reserve judgment on whether or not it's a positive or negative thing yet. I think it's polarizing is the word I use.
Well, as big a deal as the portal is, NIL is a big deal. Bob, what do you want to know about NIL?
Well, Mick, before I get into that, I just want to ask Keegan, was there a deciding factor, going back to Kathy's question, a deciding factor that made you make that move from Washington to Minnesota?
The deciding factor was just, this is where I'm supposed to be. It's the right time for my wife and my son, who's 1 year old. And it was about becoming who I'm supposed to become as a coach and a father and a husband. And once that tipped in Minnesota's favor, then there's no going back, once those things were known. So that was it.
Bobby just likes snow. Us Midwest guys, he just likes snow. He wants to be like us.
All right, well, let's jump into the NIL. What does Minnesota NIL involvement look like?
Yeah, certainly getting a crash course in that space, both on the year, but here at this institution, there's some investigating being done in terms of what kind of deals our athletes have, how they came to them, which ones they enjoy, which ones they don't. So right now, there's a bit of investigation going on from this coach entering a new space. There's a number of collectives that I think help connect athletes with opportunities. So, but it's an interesting deal. It's similar to scholarship situations on teams. I think athletes are not walking around trying to kind of flaunt their scholarship situation or nor their NIL situation. So I think for the most part, athletes handle it privately and occasionally ask for advice. That's how I've seen it addressed here at Minnesota.
So you mentioned the word collective. I know every time we're on a call, just a planning session with the master coaches, you know, Kathy will always use that term collective. All right. And Mick and I have been out of the game a little bit. And, you know, that's the first time I've heard that word. Can you talk a little bit about a collective at Minnesota? And you mentioned in plural sense, so there must be more than one. And how does that all work?
I think it's a group of donors who get organized, you know, that have, you know, I think is the way the best way to describe it, you know, just that they're passionate and they want to find a way to recruit the best athletes and support them. And so they organize themselves. Someone bites the bullet and forms a chair and a committee and they come together and they join in on projects to support student athletes or offer them opportunities, I think is the way that I've come to understand it. And yeah, certainly these are words that I never thought I would be interacting with when I first decided to coach. At my heart, I coach from a place of teaching, not from a place of business. And so I oftentimes have to educate myself on the business side of things, but still stay connected to teaching at heart.
So do the collectives contact the kids, or do they go through the university, or?
Yep.
How
They
does that
get,
work?
I think coaches cannot be involved. You can't call up a collective representative and say, hey, my O2 needs some new shoes. You know, it doesn't work like that. You know, there has to be, coaches can't be involved. Certainly, I think schools occasionally will connect with those collectives to make sure that they're compliant in what they're offering. But I think that's, for coaches who like to have control and be involved in things, it can be a scary thing to like to not have the kind of involvement when people are working directly with your athletes. It definitely has always been a fear of mine.
Keegan, did you have much of this when you were at Washington? Was that kind of brewing, or is it Michigan or Minnesota or the Big Ten just more involved in that from what you?
No, I think every school who says they have it figured out doesn't have it figured out. Let's be the first one there. There's a lot of things that we saw from a recruiting standpoint where schools were talking about what they could do long before they could do it, you know, is what I was observing. And as I investigated, there wasn't much that was actually there, but people were excited to talk about it. But there was some deals being made between athletes and collectives at Washington, just kind of, so I did get an introduction to that. But yeah, my sense is that it could be on a much larger scale here at Minnesota within the Big Ten. And again, I have nothing against our athletes being really well supported. I think there's some huge challenges at ABCA. We're certainly fighting for summer access so that athletes can be paid over the summer break. I think it's one of those things that we don't talk about is when you have to change apartments, you need first month, last month, security deposit. You know, that's not money that student athletes have. And so I have no issue with student athletes seeking financial resources to pursue their craft whatsoever.
Is it illegal for coaches to go and ask businesses and boosters to provide money to the collective?
I believe so. The rules have become more restrictive. Thankfully, there was a period of time where I think people just did what they could do before things were outlined. And so, again, coach involvement, you know, there's just more and more rules keep coming about what you're not permitted to do. And then each coach has to handle that like they do with every other rule in the NCAA. And so, yeah, you hear stories. I think less of them are true than get told about what's happening, at least in volleyball. But I don't know. I've never been one to go out looking for that stuff. You know, there's enough going on in my gym that I got to get right.
Well, it seems like there's a couple people setting the standard for that, that are playing for the championship on a yearly basis. So I don't know how you guys are going to keep up if you don't get involved in that, or if you don't lobby for legislation to limit it. There's only two ways to go, as I see, and you're president of the ABCA. So you probably get hit with a lot of this stuff because the Coaches Association, that's the only place for coaches to go right now, you know, for help. So you're heading up that agency, plus you've got a new school. You got your hands full, I think, young man.
Where was your resume, Mick, when I first got here? That's you were excited for the challenge.
Well, I'll throw you another one. we all know Notre Dame is going to join the Big Ten as soon as the Big Ten makes more than $30,000 per school, more than Notre Dame makes. So that gives you an odd number. Is there going to be expansion in the Big Ten?
They wouldn't tell me that, Mick, if I wanted to. It's just, I think if you're asking me predict it, I think it's likely. When, I think it's not as soon and as people would want or expect. But there was concern for me, a small secondary factor to the move was just the uncertainty of college sports. Certainly the Big Ten really shook things up and cast some concerns into coaches who want to be in the game for a long time. And I wasn't necessarily getting the answers or the clarity, in terms of expansion that I was hoping to hear. There was a time that you heard about schools in the Pac-12, more schools joining the Big Ten, but I didn't see signs of that happening. And that's concerning for someone who has more of their career ahead of them than behind them, that you need to be in a place for your family where there's security. So,
well, I know when I was in the Pac-12, we couldn't fly on private charters. Was that the same for you at Washington, or were you allowed to charter?
We had one opportunity to in my time there. Yep.
So with the addition of SC and UCLA to the Big Ten, how do you think that's going to change travel? Because you probably are going to charter. Doesn't the Big Ten charter a lot because you're going to smaller cities and you try to get the players back home that night after a match or to the next site? What's in your mind? You've got to deal with that here pretty soon. So how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I got to worry about it for one trip. I think about how those institutions are going to handle it on a weekly basis. And I think from what I've heard, only certain sports might charter, right, at first. And I think that won't last long personally, because you talk about the student athlete experience, that is a shockingly different experience to be traveling by charter versus commercial week after week across the country. So we'll see. They have to figure that out on their end. I'm certainly okay to be competing against those guys. I think they add a lot of value. I enjoy competing against SC and UCLA. It feels probably the only natural two teams I'll feel competing against here in these early years. But if you're asking me to predict, I think they're going to have to commit to taking care of all student athletes pretty quickly. That's what I would expect if you're asking me to predict.
I'm going to jump in here just for a quick second, Keegan. UCLA, through a Freedom of Information request to a newspaper, had to supply them with an outline of suggested new Big Ten scheduling proposals. And one of them was playing a number of contests in neutral sites and mini tournaments. Has that been discussed in volleyball too?
Oh, that's the first time I've heard of that concept. That's a bold idea.
It came out of a UCLA. It's a UCLA Freedom of Request where they were given suggestions on how they might play their conference schedule in the Big Ten from the conference office. So I was wondering if everybody's been supplied that, and if it's actually even trickled down to the coaches yet, that they're thinking about playing neutral sites and mini tournaments.
Never heard that idea. We've got our Big Ten meetings next week. I don't see that. I didn't see that on the agenda. That seems, the fan bases here are quite passionate. I think you'd see quite resistance to that concept personally.
To go with that, though, I do think for some of the sports there is talk about having those, such as a baseball or softball or some of those types of some of the teams within the conference, and not necessarily volleyball. So that's probably why you wouldn't hear as much of that for volleyball. So.
Well, Keegan, I think what we've established here is, boy, we're going to watch you because you got your hands full, big guy, and we want to see how this turns out. But we also want to wish you the best of luck. You've been awfully good to come on the show and let us know how things are going, and we'd like to follow this. You've got a program that's been competitive in the top 8 for years here, and like you said, your fan base is very passionate. You're going to get to experience snow now, so you got all these new things that are pretty exciting. So we want to thank you for coming on, wish you the best, and if we can help in any way, we'd be glad to. But go Gophers,
Mick, you've got me as motivated as you had me in 2015 when I was playing you. So you're making me prove it again. I'll prove it again.
All right, you go
Challenge
for it.
accepted. Thank you,
Good luck.
guys.
All right,
Good luck,
thanks,
Keegan.
Thanks a lot, Keegan.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Hey, Anders, you joined us over here.
I am
Exciting.
here. How are you all doing?
Exciting to see you here.
Great,
We're just
great.
moving right from, hey, you have Minnesota connections. So we're just getting Keegan off and we're bringing you on. And, you know, if you don't know that for Anders, his sister, his name is Meredith, and she played back in the day. And I remember preparing scouting reports against your sister because she was one tough cookie. So, you know, had a lot of work.
She could hit a slide.
She sure did. And her, and was it Jess Jones or somebody? Yep. That was like together. They ran a double quick. And I remember we had to move I remember it all. It's coming back to haunt me. So anyway, but hey, great to see you here and welcome to the show. We want to go over some of the things for you, but you're now currently the head coach at Vanderbilt, which is a brand new program, and you've got a lot to do there, and we're going to question you all about that. But also, you were the associate head coach. How long were you at Kentucky?
11 years in this last stint, and then I volunteered there as well, so 12 total.
Yeah, and before that, you did play at Ball State, yes.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
with Montana and that whole group that has a ton of volleyball history, you know, with coaches in the NCAA, and so you've been doing a lot for a long time there. But
volleyball. I'm one of those lucky people that knew in middle school what I wanted to do when I grew up. So yeah, I've just totally immersed myself in the sport and taken every opportunity I can get.
So did you hang out with your sister to kind of find out about the game? Is that how you learned?
Yeah, so I learned peppering with my sister, basically, is how I got involved. She kind of picked up the game a little bit later and came into the top-notch club scene as like a 17-year-old. And I remember we went to a qualifier and came home, and she had all these letters in her door. Back then you could send the media guides. So we got home and they were all overnighted there. And from that point on, I knew I wanted to be a college volleyball coach. It's just, the sport is so addicting, and the work is so fun, and you get to be a small part of a college athlete's career. It's a pretty special time of their lives.
Yeah, I think when you're starting off, especially, you know, because I don't think there's high school volleyball in Minnesota, is there, for boys? Or is
no,
there?
Almost.
Okay. You're moving in that direction.
Actually, Minnesota just went.
Yeah.
Did they?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. But as a young, you know, a lot of times you didn't have boys volleyball, so you were probably dragged along with a sister, and then you fall in love with it, where you probably played other sports as well, I would guess. And,
so I ran cross country, and I remember trying to run through our practice, whatever we had to do that day, as fast as I could, so I could catch the end of volleyball practice, so I could at least go play with them a little bit, because I hated running so much.
That's so funny. Well, I understand that whole thing, that love that you get for it. So, okay, so I'm going to just dive in because we have about 20 minutes with you, but we want to talk about your deciding factor in being at Kentucky. You guys had a lot of success, and I'm sure you were kind of, you know, getting more ready all the time as you were going through that to be the head coach yourself. So why don't you tell us about that adventure, you know, how that all happened, and give us an intro to Vanderbilt.
Yeah, it's my experience at Kentucky was kind of the dream assistant coach experience. I got more responsibility every year I was there, and I got to work for just a great mentor in Craig Skinner, and he's still kind of my number one person in the sport, and somebody I just grew to respect a ton, and how he handled players, how he handled staff, things like that. But it was a dream scenario, like I said, and we got to accomplish a lot of the goals that we had set out to do. And when I got there, they were already an accomplished program that was kind of knocking on the door for that top 10. So our goal was to kind of break through there, and won a national championship, won 6 SEC championships in a row. So that was kind of my first kind of inkling that I was starting to look, was just that we had accomplished a lot of the goals that I had kind of set out to accomplish at Kentucky. And my whole mindset was leave it better than you found it. And I felt like I was leaving the program in a better place. So I felt better about thinking about other opportunities. But I was really picky, and I didn't want to leave because I was so happy there. And I loved working for Craig so much, and loved the relationships I had there at Kentucky. So I was very picky about where and when. And when Vanderbilt announced in April that they were going to be adding a program, I told my husband that day that I wanted to go for this job. My comfortability with the SEC, I feel really comfortable in the league. I've spent 13 seasons now in the league, and honestly didn't know anything about the SEC before I joined in 2011. but now have a strong passion to try to make the SEC the best volleyball conference in the country. And we definitely have a ways to go, but I feel like Vanderbilt has to be successful, a successful program for the SEC to kind of achieve that goal. The other thing why I wanted this job right away was just the total package that this place has to offer. And from academics, it's very unique. Nowhere else in the SEC can offer the same academic package that we can. The city of Nashville is incredibly fun to live in. It's growing like crazy. It's really easy to get to. It's right in the middle of the country, so that's a lot of fun. It has good weather too. And then the opportunity, like I said, to stay in the SEC and build a program that I feel in time can win national championships. And I do feel like the recipe is here, Vanderbilt has that recipe to win national championships. And like I said, it's going to take some time. But I guess the last reason why I was really invested in this job opportunity was just the uniqueness of being able to make it my own. And I mean, who gets to do this opportunity of starting a program from scratch? And like later today, I have meetings with architects to discuss, the beginning stages of our new facility. We don't have any volleyballs right now. We had a kind of a little meet and greet the other day, and we don't have any volleyballs. So we had to borrow volleyballs from the club team. We're designing uniforms. I mean, it's everything. And this stuff is daunting, yes, but it's also really fun. And like, again, who gets to do this? And my whole satisfaction in my career at Kentucky was building and just taking those steps each year. And we're starting at a very different point here, but there's obviously a lot of building ahead. So it just felt like the perfect fit.
I know there's questions that'll come up on this, but your first volleyball season will be 2025, yes?
Correct.
So
yeah.
you have a lot of planning to do. You have a lot of time to kind of get this thing rolling. Was that a weird thing to take it at this point, or like, because you won't be playing next year? So that's, how are you handling that piece? And I know there's more questions down the road here to sculpt it, but go ahead and tell me about that.
Yeah, I think I'll probably miss it a lot more in the fall when all of a sudden I'm watching all these matches on TV and we're just sitting, twiddling our thumbs and thinking about recruiting and thinking about 2 years from now. But right now it's like I'm drinking out of a fire hose. So I'm just trying to kind of take it day by day. But yeah, the whole lead up to 2025 was very important to me. And in the interview process, we kind of talked through a little bit of whether I thought 24 would be an option or if I thought 25 would be a better option. And for me, it was 25 or nothing. I just don't think that we have a realistic chance to build a 15-person roster in 2024, knowing the admission requirements of Vanderbilt and knowing it's not easy to transfer here. It can be done, but it's not easy. So it was very important to me that we had enough lead up time to make this a successful program. But I also want to add that during that interview process, the administration made it very clear to me that this is not something they're adding because they have to. Title IX, they're compliant here. This isn't something they needed to do another female sport. They're doing this because they want to be successful, and they shared kind of the same vision that I share for the program.
That is awesome. Yeah, and Mick, I know you have some questions you want to dive into, and I know he'll have you sitting here for a little bit with those, but go ahead, Mick.
Well, I have a real hard one.
Yeah.
I'm a Hoosier, so we follow basketball real close. Vanderbilt lost by 60 points the other night to Alabama. How the heck can that happen?
Yeah, Bama was coming off that loss to Oklahoma, which I don't know how that one happened either, because Bama's good. So I was nervous they were going to come out strong. But the other dagger there is Brandon Miller, Alabama's big freshman. He's from Nashville too, so it's kind of a double whammy.
Ooh.
Okay, so you passed the first question. You had an answer. Didn't think you'd be ready for that one. So let's try this. This is a two-part question.
Ooh.
How many head coaches from the Ball State men's team are coaching in Division I women's volleyball right now?
Men's team or Ball State University?
Ball State men's
players,
team.
Athletes.
Players.
Got to be a player.
Now.
Okay.
Head coaching.
Head
Can't
coaching.
count you anymore, Michael.
No, can't count me.
Craig, Dave. Sheffield didn't play.
Yeah, he was the manager, right?
Yeah, so I don't know if I count him or not.
That was a trick question. Yep. Okay.
Who am I missing?
Didn't he run cross country?
Don't know.
Sure.
And the second part of that question is, how many national championships do Ball State head coaches, former players who are head coaches, have now?
Are you in that one?
Well, I'm a former.
Okay, so you got two. Craig's got one. I got one, I guess, if we count that one as a shot. Is that it?
Yeah, but you missed. You missed the. I have 3.
Sorry, my bad. Was it Texas was the first one?
So I'm just getting you going here. But
Just
look,
adding in stats.
let's really talk about this, because we were giving Keegan kind of a hard time because he really got his hands full. But talk about having your hands full. So you got to start a program from scratch. Now, on the one hand, that's pretty darn exciting, right? You're the man. You're the only coach of women's volleyball at Vanderbilt University ever. And so that's pretty good. But along with that, you've hired an assistant coach now. And when will you round out your coaching staff? And what are you guys going to do?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I kind of went into the process of hiring a staff. I wasn't one of those people that had 2 people in mind for the last 5 years. I really wanted to make sure I opened it up and talked to people I didn't know very well. And Russell Corbelli was one of those people, but his experience at Stanford as a volunteer and working with recruiting and admissions there was huge to me. And then I should be announced. I actually have hired my next assistant. It should be announced next week. But she actually has some similar experience at a high academic institution. So I'm excited about those 2. And then we'll probably add an ops person this summer, and then another assistant and a technical coordinator about a year from now. So it's kind of a gradual kind of progression of adding staff. But one of the things that I guess this biggest struggle of what we're doing on a day-to-day basis right now is just kind of prioritizing what's most important today, because I could stay here at work for the next 3 months and never leave, never sleep, and I'd have stuff to do. So it's just making sure of what we're doing today is probably the most important. We actually have a visit tomorrow, so that'll be our first visit, 2024. And I know we'll get into our roster breakdown a little bit more later, but recruiting is obviously the main focus right now, but also making sure that our staff is going to put a lot of emphasis on putting good processes in place. So we have templates ready to go. We have, like I said, processes ready to go. So when we get busier and we get more into the normal routine of a college volleyball coach, we can operate more efficiently. So that's one of the big things we're doing right now as well. But I know this time we have is valuable, and I know there's a lot of things we can do that will last a lot longer than hopefully any of us are here in terms of culture and building the program. So I'm very serious about using that time wisely. And it maybe seems like all we have to do is recruit, but we'd like to run camps this summer, and that's going to be a big deal just with the first time ever doing that and sharing court space and things like that. And then this fall, we're hoping to actually travel around other gyms and kind of craft our philosophy as coaches. So we'll travel hopefully to other practices around the country and learn from those coaches and get in gyms and just trying to take advantage of the time we have that we normally wouldn't once we start competing.
If they think you're going to be good, they're not going to let you in.
That's true. We'll go out of conference. We'll skip the SEC gyms.
So the roster you talked about. So if you had students at Vanderbilt right now, could you be training them if they decided they wanted to come out for volleyball?
No, we've decided like the fall of 2024 is the first time we'll sponsor athletes. So next fall we'll bring in, it's looking like a class of about 6-ish in the 2024 class, and they'll train for a full year in redshirt. But I think there's a couple of key advantages to that. One, they can get 2 degrees from Vanderbilt in 5 years, and that's obviously a huge selling point. On top of that, a lot of the 2024s that are still available might be a little more raw, maybe less polished. So we're definitely targeting some athletes that we think will be much more ready for college volleyball after a full year of training in a college gym. So I think that's an advantage. And then also what I'm telling recruits on the phone is, hey, if you play, you're going to be in the record book. We're literally going to write the record book here. So there's a lot of cool things that come along with being one of the first athletes in a program. But the main focus for that 2024 class, like I said, athleticism is definitely there so we can compete with the SEC schools. But this class is going to create our culture. Everyone's going to come in the following year and follow everything they do, from where to go to, study tables, where the dining halls are, how we handle our off time, things like that. So we're really, really focusing on making sure this 2024 class is character is priority number 1.
So since you don't have a history, is NIL something that you need to develop to be able to have things to offer for new students coming in?
Yes, in terms of, I think everywhere, even if you have history, NIL is important now. And you can see some of these schools that are cleaning up in the portal. And I've heard through other coaches that they're doing a really good job with their NIL packages, and some schools have it and some don't. Thankfully, we have a couple collectives here at Vanderbilt, and we're not entirely sure what it'll look like for volleyball. But my point on that is, if you come to play at Vanderbilt, you better be thinking a lot more about the degree and the value that your degree will give you over your life than what you can make in 4 years in NIL money. And I don't just say that because I don't know how much money we have right now. I truly believe that you really should be thinking about this experience at Vanderbilt as a lifelong decision, and what it can bring for your professional life when you leave. But we are in a huge city like Nashville, and it's had the highest economic growth of any city in the last couple of years. So there are a ton of opportunities around the city for some NIL deals. I admittedly haven't dived into it yet, and I'm not exactly sure what we'll be able to offer. But I do know we have an Ingram Center here, which kind of houses all of our academics, all of our career development, also all of our NIL and community involvement opportunities. So we do have a space for our athletes to go should they want to pursue that.
And final question, talk about the portal. Why wouldn't you go to the portal so you could be competitive right away?
Well, one, the extra COVID year is going to end here pretty soon. So we're going to start seeing a lot fewer grad transfers. I think in 2024 is the last year that technically you can have a grad transfer based on your COVID year. So with us starting in 2025, the only way we can really get grad transfers, the traditional grad transfer that we've seen in the last couple of years, is if they were to redshirt and then play. I'm not sure we're going to be able to convince many athletes who've played for 4 years to redshirt one and then play again. So we'll see, and we'll definitely go after some next spring and the following spring to try to get some experience on our roster. But the bigger reason why I'm not trying to rely on it is admissions wise, I'm not sure we can. It's very, very hard to transfer into Vanderbilt unless you are a grad student or transferring after your freshman year. If you get in that kind of tweener area based on how your credits are kind of transferring over, it's pretty tough. So we're trying to go into it with a mindset of we can't rely on it. And then hopefully if we are able to pull a couple people from it, those will kind of be considered our bonus experienced players.
Anders, correct me if I'm wrong, but when I went to Tennessee, the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, in 1979, I think Vanderbilt was just dropping their volleyball program. Was that considered a varsity program? I mean, of course, that's so long ago. You are completely starting brand new. I don't even know.
AIAW, probably.
Yeah, was it considered a varsity sport at that point?
It was considered a varsity sport, and I believe they had it for 2 seasons. I think 1980 was the last season. And I actually need to get to the bottom of that. I'm not sure why they dropped it, honestly. The reason they haven't added it until now, the main reason has been space. We just don't have any space here on campus, and campus is very landlocked within the city. So that's why we don't have softball. We don't have room for a softball field. But we're undergoing some capital projects that's going to move basketball into a different facility, and that'll open up a lot of space for us. But their new facility is actually going to be on the end of our football stadium. So it's going to be connected to the end zone of the football stadium. So they have to be really creative in how they're doing it around here. And all of our athletic facilities basically touch in some way or another, which is kind of unique. And actually our football and baseball stadiums share like a concourse corridor, which I had never seen before either, but a lot of just uniqueness of the situation here.
So you're not going to be playing in that basketball arena that was elevated.
No, we are not. We are going to be next door. Right now they have like a 3-ish court basketball practice facility. So again, that's what I'm meeting about this afternoon, but they're going to convert that into a volleyball only space. So it'll have our locker room, our team room, our offices are above it where women's basketball are now. And then they're going to kind of revamp the gym into, like I said, a practice and playing location.
So 2025, when you're actually have a team and enter the SEC as a playing entity at that point, there might be 16 teams. Has anyone talked to you about how the SEC is going to look at that point?
Yeah, we had our SEC head coaches meeting last week, and I actually got to go as a non-voting member. So I had to remind myself to keep my hand down a few times, but we're obviously very aware of the 16. We're not exactly sure how it's going to be yet. I know we're close. But there's a couple options. First of all, 16 is a lot easier to schedule than 13. We've had 13 for the last 10 years, and it's been a nightmare from a scheduling perspective. Prime numbers are not good for scheduling. So 16 will be a lot better in that aspect. And I know one of the options they're looking at is a single round robin and then a conference tournament to end the season. So they're talking about bringing that back, which is something I'm in favor of. I think our athletes deserve it. But we'll see. There's obviously a lot more options with the 16 teams. And if it'll be an East and a West, I don't think so, but there's talk of that. It just kind of all depends on what we decide when Texas and Oklahoma join.
Kathy, you have any closing comments or questions for?
And that have they talked about Texas, and are you guys sure whether they're coming in 24 or 25, or have you heard any more about that?
I think people that are way more important than all of us know, but it's going to be 24 or 25. We kind of got the one person kind of leaned towards 24 when we were in our meetings the other day, another leaned towards 25. So I'm not really sure. I know that Vanderbilt will not be starting until 2025. So we'll have 16 schools then. But yeah, I think it's going to be a really exciting conference, and hopefully will propel us to catch the Big Ten.
Yeah, so they may need to change the schedule to accommodate those two teams and then add your team and change the conference schedule again. So
yeah,
kind of looking at it that way. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But from my understanding, the scheduling is always messy, even if you think it's not going to be. So it sounds like we've had to redo it a lot the last few years.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for you. I know all of us are. We thank you for being on the show, and you've had a lot of experience, and it's going to be a lot of planning, but it's really rewarding. So great for you and your program, and for actually Nashville area. That's going to be great.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, I can't stop smiling. Every day's been a challenge, but a lot of fun. And I really feel like this is the right fit for me, people and place wise. So it's been really exciting, and thank you all for what you're doing, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right, Andrew, thanks a lot for being on.
Good luck, Anders. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Anders. Congrats.
Thank you.
All right, guys, let's go ahead and transition to buzz reaction. All right. I know, Bill, we haven't had a chance to hear much from you. I know you've been observing both guests. Do you have any thoughts?
He's under the weather, for those of you who don't know.
Well, I'm under the weather, but you know what today is in football? Today is the Wednesday of commitment, I believe, in Division I football. And we talked about NIL. And so one interesting thing that occurred this morning was a quarterback. I think he's a quarterback. He originally was going to go to Miami, and then Florida Collective got him to change his mind, and he signed a letter of intent in November to go to Florida.
For $1 million, right?
13.1 million.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
He signed to go to Florida, his letter of intent, but then in his discussions with the Florida Collective, somehow the contract and the lawyer he hired, it turned out that they weren't going to really give him what they talked about giving him when he was being recruited. So he's out of his national letter of intent, and he's going to Arizona State, where his dad went. And he said, we're not worried about the NIL. I'm going to get where I'm going, and I'll get what I get when I get there. So when I heard the number, 13.1 million from the Florida Collective, I was like, and then I did some research. I went online, and they were talking about coaches who are now complaining that they can't recruit the players they want because the collective has contacted one group of players and the coach wants another group of players, and the collective won't give the coach money for the players he wants to recruit. They want to give money to the players they want the coach to recruit. And coaches are like, they're starting to dictate to us who they want, not who I want. And they're like, the collective was supposed to take care of the athletes once they get here, but the collectives are becoming increasingly more aggressive.
Well, they can't award scholarships.
Right. But the thing is,
they're going to award $13.1 million. Who cares about the scholarship?
Like blue chips back.
The point is, the idea of the NIL was our kids who are here should be able to sell their name, image, and likeness. And now, so it was a benefit. But now what's happening is the coaches who were excited about it are now saying some collectives are dictating who we should recruit, not anything else. And so there's this, if we don't recruit the player they want, will they give money to the players we have? So it's an interesting dilemma.
That's a new twist completely, Bill.
And what's happening is the collectives are now competing with each other. So there's more than one collective at a school. They're all hitting the same, since the school can't control who they talk to, they're hitting all the boosters. And boosters are starting to have what they call check tiredness. They're tired of writing checks to all the collectives. They want to only write it to one. So the collectives are trying to figure out how to merge so that there's only one collective. But they, each 501(c) collective on every campus, there's some guys with money in there. They want to control their collective. They don't want another collective to tell them what to do. So it's crazy. It's crazy out there.
Well, this will be real interesting come next week, because next week we have Jamie Morrison from A&M on the show. And Mick, from what you seem to be able to find out, you think A&M has the biggest collective or the biggest war chest, whether that's multiple collectives or not, of any school in the country.
Well, that's really the scuttlebutt. Whether they do or whether they don't, a lot of questions on how they got there and who's involved. Now, we heard Keegan say the coaches couldn't be involved in any of that. But we've seen for a fact that there are coaches out there really drumming up support to put money into a collective for their sport. So who knows what the rules are? I mean, I think in the strictest sense, Keegan's probably right. I guess there's 92 or 98 now violations pending with the NCAA on this alone from different sports and different schools. But this is a mess, folks, and I just I don't see how you can sit by the sideline and think you're going to be able to compete. On the other hand, I know, for instance, for a while at USC, there were two collectives. There was one the athletic director and the school backed. So wouldn't that be illegal if the coaches can't do that? And secondly, then there was an alumni group, like Bill said, that also wanted to be the collective, and they were going to give football players for USC money, I guess, who they believed they should do that with. So there are some real communication issues here, and involvement. It seems like the only way these can be successful is everybody is involved. The coach is involved, the school's involved, and the alumni are involved. Now, the only way you're going to get rules is now through the United States government. That's the only way you're going to get rules that you can make sense out of this thing. So we've got a real mess, as Bill pointed out, I believe today. Just if it starts at football, it'll be to volleyball here pretty soon. And the question we didn't get to, and I meant to ask Anders about his thought about, is the portal, our NIL, going to determine that we have 20 elite teams in women's volleyball and everybody else is just out there playing? Because,
has anybody heard of a collective for volleyball only at a school yet? I mean, of course, the lion's share of the money is probably going to be football and basketball, but.
Well, if I was going to gamble, I would gamble that Nebraska has a collective for volleyball. I would gamble that Texas might have a collective for volleyball. I would gamble that Wisconsin might have a collective for volleyball.
So that's going to go towards those 20 other teams going to a whole different level.
Yeah,
I do think that there's collectives for a lot of volleyball teams, but they're within a bigger collective. So it's not just there's this one massive thing. It's one massive thing within the whole collective. And then there's this person's giving to volleyball, so they're filling up that bucket or this bucket or that bucket for those sports.
that's where they have an organized collective.
Right. Right.
Yeah, but
where
see,
that's happening.
right. But anybody, Kathy, but anybody, like if I'm Costco and my daughter's playing volleyball and she wants to go to U of H, I can form my own 501(c) and become my own collective, and I can sponsor any kids off the volleyball team I want to without ever having any contact with the university or the athletic department.
Yes, you can.
So
That sounds like a pretty good tax shelter.
Yeah.
That's gonna
Well, it
open
is.
a whole nother can of worms.
Oh, it's already. You can donate to a 50. You can donate to a collective, and it is a tax deduction.
Well,
But yeah,
all right, well, before
be-
we're gonna have to delve into this again more next week. And I think we may actually have a show just on NIL because there's so much there that our coaches that listen to us need to hear and learn about. And I think there's a lot that we're interested in.
Well,
Go
Bob,
ahead.
but we have two football power coaches coming on next week, right?
Yeah.
We have Jamie Morrison, the brand new coach at Texas A&M, who's never been a head coach in collegiate women's volleyball, but has been a head coach internationally. And we
Aaron
have
Virtue from Michigan.
Aaron Virtue from the University of Michigan, another football dynasty. Right now, it seems like they're chasing each other's tail up there, trying to figure out what Harbaugh is doing. But they have beaten Ohio State twice now in a row in football, and that hasn't happened since Schembechler was there. So, yeah, we've got some big time schools coming on with their volleyball coaches, both of which are brand new. So we should ask some interesting questions, I think.
Well,
Okay.
and they're getting started. I don't know how much they're actually aware of yet, just diving in. So I think, getting them to understand those questions coming in and being able to get as much as they can on it, because it is interesting for sure.
Well, the thing is that when you show up at a school now as a new coach, the first thing you got to do is they've got to walk you into the compliance office, and they've got to have a quick discussion about, here's our collectives, here's what's going on, because you want to make sure that your school, your coaches get an education from the department first before some guy who's running a collective calls the coach and wants to talk to him. You want your training to come from the school out, not from the collective in.
Yep. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, we only have a couple of minutes left, so let me just go over a couple of things with you guys. We continue to get more information from our coaches as well as the players that were involved at the the college transfer showcase at the AVCA convention. I just wanted to share a couple of things with you. We're still at 100% that the 114 coaches that were actually there at the college transfer showcase that said that they felt like this was a valuable experience. They felt like Bill, I don't think I shared this with you, but the drills that we were doing and the 6-on-6, the way we were running it was very effective. 100% of them said it was an effective way for them to actually identify and do some recruiting. 75% of them, we're still at 75% that have contacted the athletes. There's a couple of coaches a few coaches that didn't. And 100% of them said it was a worthwhile experience. And on the athletes side, it's pretty much the same type thing. We have 100% of the athletes felt like they enjoyed the experience. 100% of them asked if the skill training that we did put them in the best light for college coaches to evaluate them, and they agreed to that. And we had from 0 to 114 kids were contacted. We had a couple of kids that actually had 114 coaches contact them. There was one athlete that didn't have anybody contact them. All right, but even though 100% of them said it helped them be able to decide where they wanted to continue their education. So I just wanted to share that with you all, because I thought it was a good response that we had gotten from that first ever college transfer showcase that Master Coaches ran this year at the AVCA convention.
And we'll be doing it again next year in Tampa, right?
Yeah, and I think I'm excited about that. I think we're actually going to have more people there because it's warm weather. Everybody's going to want to go
Yeah.
to the AVCA convention next year.
Both coaches and potential transfers, right?
There you go.
Yeah, after you're done with the portal, after you're done with your transfer showcase, the beach is right down the street.
Then we go play doubles right on the beach.
Exactly.
All right, well, listen, thanks everybody for tuning in again this week, and look forward to next week's show. Like Mick had mentioned, we have two outstanding coaches coming on from big programs that I think is going to make it a very interesting time and discussion that we'll have.
All right. Thanks, Bob.
All right.
Great show, you guys.
See you guys
Thanks,
later.
Bob.
Bill,
Okay.
get well.
Thank you very much.
And no long COVID or anything like that.
I hear you. I'm still
Okay.
positive today, so.